apologies, we are running a little late. One of the workshop is just ending right now. Please stay here. I will keep you updated on our estimated starting time. Alright? Please be patient. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I had a mic issue very typical of me, but how's everyone doing? Great. Good. Right? We're coming towards the end of Youth Pact. I understand you had quite a packed day yesterday and today. Everyone still feeling up for it? Can I hear some energy in the crowd? Yeah, I know it's always tough to get the lunch crowd, you know, it's getting a bit slow, but hopefully we'll pick things up. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to MIDT and Dailers for having us. We are coming towards the end of the Youth Pact. We've seen a lot and heard a lot of important issues having been covered. Semalam sampai hari ini kita dengar banyak isu-isu penting, and it's nice to see a lot of young people are interested taking part in these conversations and this discourse. But for this hour, we want to talk about something that I would say is often looked past, something yang kita selalu macam abaikanlah bila kita cakap pasal isu-isu semasa. We talk about current issues, nation building and development, and that is about the Orang Asli and the current state of the Orang Asli communities, the substantial encroachment on native territories of Orang Asli, where, if I may, in short, under the federal constitution, Orang Asli's rights are enshrined in 3 main articles. And in short, these articles have to do with their protection, their interests, and the recognition of their welfare. But unfortunately, the constitutional implementation of these articles, benda-benda yang dekat dalam perlembagaan tu, is not, I would say, implemented that well or fully at the state level, and in particular the issue of land rights, which remain a critical and unresolved issue at times, conflicting with commercial interests. So that's the kind of thing that we want to be talking about. We want to hear from the panelists on how challenges, obstacles faced by Orang Asli still remain to this day. Perhaps in some way have taken in new forms, contemporary forms, and how other communities can be empowered to advocate for the rights of Orang Asli, like you guys being here today. And how, maybe this all just boils down to just political will, really. All it takes is just to flick a switch and make things better. So, as you can see, we have a lineup of great panelists here to talk about this. But before we start and before I introduce them, I just want to go over some of the house rules. We would like for every session to be a safe space for intellectual discourse. This does not mean that no one is allowed to disagree with each other, but it means that you are expected to be respectful. And if you like to reproduce any of the sharing by the speakers, please do so responsibly. Avoid misquoting or taking them out of context. For sharing from members of the audience specifically, Chatham House rules apply, which means that you are free to use the information and experiences shared, but please do not build their identity. Keep your mobile phones on silent throughout the session. You are not allowed to record the session. We have the live stream going on. However, you may take short clips for the IG story and whatever social media purposes. And as the BIM interpreters are seated on the right side of the hall, as you can see, for those who would prefer, you may be seated closer to the interpreter for better view and access. You are also encouraged to ask questions at the end of the session. We have about 15 minutes. Really, it's not that much of time to ask questions, so please go ahead and grab the opportunity, grab the mic to ask your question as soon as we begin the Q&A session. Raise your hands and you may just voice out any questions or thoughts you'd like to share. So, with me today, we have Mr. Jerald, Director of COMAS. We have Eliana, Program Coordinator of Kata Wanita Orang Asli, Amani Williams-Hunt, Semai Leader and Advocate for Batoni, and Johnson, Co-Founder and Group CEO of EPIC Collective. Unfortunately, Dr. Colin is not able to join us today. He's not feeling well, he's under the weather, but I'm sure our line of panelists today will be able to explain very thoroughly everything that you need to know about Orang Asli and what challenges they face today. So I think that's where I want to start with this session. I want to, understand actually from the past few years up to today, what are actually the most persistent and remaining issues. Batoni, we can start with you. If we can understand and have an overview, apa sebenarnya masalah-masalah yang dihadapi komuniti Orang Asli dulu sampailah sekarang, what issues remain and what progress have we seen or lack thereof?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be into this session. Yeah, I'm most happy, most delighted, to share my experiences and whatever I know about the Orang Asli. I'm an Orang Asli myself, and I've been involved in Orang Asli struggle for so many years, I think about 30 years ago, since 30 years ago. Okay, well, I'm sure as many of you would know, one of the main or crucial issues faced by Orang Asli is in regards to land right. Yeah, Orang Asli, even though there is an act, an enactment, a legislation, a law Act 134, which was enacted for the Orang Asli in 1954, there's some provision in regards to Orang Asli land, and the court, through various cases, claim initiated by the Orang Asli, filed by the Orang Asli, the court has recognized that Orang Asli has rights over the land at common law, tanah adat, customary land, but in spite of this, land issue, recognition of Orang Asli land right, is still a long way to go, So you hear about encroachment, from various parties, not just private individuals, it's from even government agencies, almost every day, yeah. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I get call, from Orang Asli, literally, every other day, complaining about the land being encroached, And you hear about villagers, being forced, to move out, And of course, now the hot issue is in Johor, as you all know, Orang Asli land, there's a proposal, or I should say a decree, that Orang Asli land to be placed as Southern land, which not many Orang Asli are. So many Orang Asli are against it, those in Johor, you would probably have read in the papers, So land issue is a very crucial issue, and it doesn't seem to be moving, seeing light at the end of the tunnel, Even though, you hear about it, that, I will get certain number of Orang Asli kampung, but still, the record, the position is still very dismal, very unsatisfactory. About sometime in October last year, there was a session held by the government through Jabatan Kemajuan Orang Asli with Orang Asli leaders or Orang Asli representatives. It was disclosed that some 25% of Orang Asli land were gazetted, involving about 200 villages out of 853 Orang Asli villages. So land is still a very crucial issue, and this has been the main struggle of the Orang Asli, because land, it ties with everything about the Orang Asli, their identity, their history, their economy, their culture, and it's all tied to the land, yeah. So if the land is not recognized, land right is not recognized, when they lose the land, they lose all this, yeah. So like there is a saying, in Semai, my language, they say, I just quote Semai word, they say, wala ti, wala adat, wala sinu, which means no land, no adat, no life, for the Orang Asli. So it, in a nutshell, it explains everything.
Thank you for that. Based on what we just heard, right, apa yang kita dengar tadi, if I may just gauge in the crowd, and those at home, you can leave your comments in the live stream as well. How well do you know these issues that Pak Tony was talking about just now, about land rights being encroached upon? If you may raise your hand, how well do you know this? You can raise your hand if you think you know about this. Siapa yang rasa macam dia faham, dia tahu apa yang dia cakap tadi? Or if you don't know, if you really don't know, you can raise your hands as well. It's okay to admit you don't know. Okay, so I just want to gauge the level of understanding that we have in the audience. It's really not wrong to know about this. As I said, ramai yang sebenarnya tak tahu pasal benda ni. It's often something that's forgotten, but it's actually a major issue. And it's nice to see a lot of young people who are interested in learning about this, but it's probably also nice to hear from another young person. Kita dengar daripada perspektif anak muda juga, macam mana diorang handle isu ni. And it's not just something that adults are worried about, but it can affect young people as well. So mungkin kita nak dengarkan daripada Eliana. Eliana boleh kongsikan daripada perspektif anak muda, macam mana Eliana berdepan dengan isu ni, dan how does it affect you punya family, you punya lifestyle, and you growing up as a young person, Eliana?
Okay, pertama sekali saya pun juga orang asli. Saya orang asli dari suku Jakun, Pahang. So bila bercerita tentang isu orang asli, Pak Tony tadi dah ada mention lah tentang isu tanah, iaitu nadi lah, umpama nadi kepada orang asli. Jadi sekarang mungkin saya pergi ke isu yang lebih dekat lah dengan kawan-kawan saya. saya pun belia. So isu antara yang kami sedang bawakan adalah isu tentang pendidikan lah. So sebentar tadi Bang Tony ada cerita tentang ibarat macam penindasan lah, sebab kita tak mereka tak recognize hak wilayah tanah adat kami. So dari segi pendidikan, dekat sini saya nak kongsikan lah pengalaman saya. Jadi dulu sebelum ni saya ada dengar satu perkongsian dari seorang ibu dari Johor, di mana dia berkongsi tentang anaknya. Dia masuk ke sekolah dia duduk dekat kampung orang asli. So sekolah dia dalam kampung dan majoriti adalah pelajar orang asli. So anak dia masuk ke sekolah dan ditanya dekat cikgu, kenapa anak dia di dalam kelas pendidikan khas OKU, di mana ia dilabel sebagai lemah IQ lah, rendah IQ, dan ditanya kenapalah anak dia dekat situ. So cikgu tersebut cakaplah, anak awak tak pandai membaca, tak pandai mengira, tak pandai menulis. So dia tak percaya anak dia macam tu. And then dia ambil keputusan untuk keluarkan anak dia dari sekolah tersebut. Dan dia pada awalnya, mula-mula dia sendirilah yang ajar anak dia dekat rumah. Dan akhirnya dia masukkan semula ke sekolah yang berdekatan dengan bandar. Dan di mana sekolah tu campur-campur lah, ada bangsa Cina, bangsa Melayu dan lain-lain lah. Jadi bila dia masukkan anak dia dekat sekolah, anak dia jalani peperiksaan lah. Surprisingly, anak dia dapat nombor 1 dalam kelas. So dekat sini sebenarnya saya nak sampaikan, sebenarnya ada penindasan lah dekat dalam sekolah pun. Cikgu-cikgu tak nak mengajar murid orang asli. Dan sebenarnya cikgu-cikgu yang mengajar murid orang asli yang dekat dalam pendidikan khas lah, mereka akan dapat allowance tambahan per budak, per pelajar lah yang mereka ajar. Dan diorang akan dapat allowance tambahan lah sebab mengajar kanak-kanak pendidikan khas. Jadi even bukan hak asasi orang asli, tapi hak asasi manusia pun kami dah ditindas. Kami tak pergi sekolah. Macam mana sekiranya cikgu tak nak ajar kita orang, dan kawan-kawan yang lain disebabkan kita orang tak ada pendidikan, dan seterusnya kita orang akan dibuli lah. So ini satu bentuk penindasan yang orang lain tak nampak. Orang hanya ingat, oh kanak-kanak orang asli mereka dibuli, sama juga bangsa lain pun dibuli. Jadi kenapa kita orang tak hadap ke benda tu? Tapi sebenarnya tindakan guru yang merupakan peranan yang paling penting dalam pendidikan pun tak jalankan tanggungjawab. Tapi saya bukan mention semua guru lah, mungkin ada sesetengah guru. Ya.
Thank you Eliana. Tadi kita tengok dalam audience, saya boleh katalah lebih ramai yang tak tahu pasal isu-isu orang asli berbanding mereka yang tahu. Tadi tak ramai yang angkat tangan. Tapi Eliana tadi menarik kongsikan pengalaman tu. Bagi Eliana, apa yang orang selalu salah faham atau salah anggap pasal komuniti orang asli?
So orang selalu anggap yang kita orang adalah bangsa yang perlu dibantu. Ramailah banyak pihak, bukan setakat kerajaan saja, tetapi even bukan kerajaan pun berlumba-lumba nak bantu orang asli sebab mereka orang yang susah, orang yang tak tahu buat keputusan. So banyak orang datang nak bantulah. So satu ibarat macam orang nak tolong kita orang keluarkan dan buat keputusan untuk kita orang dan tentukan hala tuju kita orang. Tapi kita orang pun manusia, kita orang pun bangsa Malaysia, kita orang tahu nak buat keputusan, tahu apa yang terbaik untuk even bermula dari keluarga. Kami tahulah bermula dari keluarga, kami tahu apa keputusan yang terbaik. Dan ya.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Ya, salah faham berkenaan dengan orang asli. Ya, actually the perception I'm sorry to say this, not all, but the general perception is Orang Asli are backward, backward, they are incapable, they don't have the skill. And in the past, one of the most serious allegations is Orang Asli do not want progress or development, So no point helping them, it's just wasting time, And also, as she has said, Orang Asli can't make decisions, they can't decide what is good for them. And because of that, you get, I'm not talking about NGOs, NGOs, they come, they help, with sincerity, There are groups, very, very concerned about Orang Asli. They are most thankful, for these people, they don't have any self-interest, it's all for the benefits of the Orang Asli. But there are certain parties, including the state, they say, it's us, who can decide for the Orang Asli, they say. What we decide for the Orang Asli is good for the Orang Asli, even though that is not necessarily so. And in fact, most of the time the decision is wrong, So they just ignore, they just could not be concerned, about you all, okay, let me say, there is a convention, international convention called United Declaration Rights of the Indigenous People, Two of the main pillars, of that declaration is self-determination and free prior informed consent, That anything, that is to be implemented for the Orang Asli, be it policy or project, it has to be done with the consent of the Orang Asli, and the Orang Asli has the right to decide, But these are being ignored, because they think Orang Asli not capable, of deciding for themselves. So this is actually the main problem. So because of that, you get projects, implemented, and this project fail because they don't consult the Orang Asli, and they don't care. They just say, okay, we implement this, it's good for you. But most of the time, it fails. And this include economic project, schemes. The people who benefit are not Orang Asli, like landscape, for instance, the agencies, they are the one who reaps the profit, not the Orang Asli. Orang Asli are beaten $300, $400 a month, how to survive, on that sort of income, So it's a lot of the problem, is, to me, I feel, because of this thing about this dichotomy, I and you, everybody take care of their own interests. We don't see ourselves as relations, Many always think, okay, you, I, and unfortunately, this kind of thinking, mindset, extends to the Orang Asli. And Orang Asli, because of the low, what you call, how to say, the way people look at Orang Asli, without any kind of respect, and say, okay, we decide for you, what is good for you, and most of the time, it's not good for the Orang Asli.
Thank you. I think here it's also interesting to hear from the perspective of someone who has been on the other side of the coin of possibly wanting to advocate, wanting to improve things for the better, working with the government. Jerald, you've been with Suhakam before, and you've been in that position. And it's interesting what they were trying to say. There's a difference between wanting to help them as being helpless victims, but then wanting to empower them, bantu untuk mereka membangun sendiri. That is a different thing. So how do you differentiate between this?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invite. I think two cases will give you the picture of where the Orang Asli is stuck in the so-called developed nation of Malaysia. The first example I'm going to give you, last year at the height of COVID vaccination, one of the lowest COVID vaccination was the Orang Asli community. JAKWA, the Jabatan Kemajuan Orang Asli, that's the irony, the word Jabatan Kemajuan Orang Asli, but the Orang Asli is not maju yet after almost 60 years. JAKWA called me and said, Jerald, you know the community, can you go and talk to them? So they were actually very sincerely getting help from everyone. I think Batoni was also called to go and try to appease. So we're wondering, how come everyone knows the danger? Kalau tidak ambil vaksin mungkin mati. So I went to a few villages, nobody wants to come with them. We called meeting, then I was talking to them. They said, kenapa kita mau percaya that they say this vaccine is untuk kita? So I like, because they say we also reading the same WhatsApp. But you know, that time and all the myths, right? Then they say, ini orang bandar yang hantar kita, you know, they told us bahaya. Then I dug deeper to say, no, they are here actually, they want to help you. Then they say, mana boleh percaya? So biasa kita pergi hospital, mereka tak indahkan kita. They treat us badly, tunggu sana, jerit kita. They say, why suddenly now they are caring? So the experience of them as Malaysians to access, you mentioned education, but even health services, was not in favor of building trust. So I had to do all kinds of things to convince them. And then they had another, they said, oh, I'm sure they will give you orang bandar the best vaccine. You know, at that time the vaccine had some colors, right? They're showing me on WhatsApp. Yang ni warna-warna ni mesti orang ambil dapat yang warna yang paling best. Kita yang dah reject punya akan sampai. So I'm wondering, oh my God, where did they get all this for? But that's the experience of our 220,000 orang asli di Semenanjung Malaysia. Dah berpuluh-puluh tahun, their experience is tak boleh percaya dan dijaga dengan cara yang tidak hormat lah. So I think that's the first component. The second part is, you know, we celebrate Independence Day kan, 31 August for Semenanjung, or you know 16 September for whole of Malaysia. Yay. But you know what that did to the orang asli? It actually took away their rights as orang kampung. This is their land, but suddenly somebody drew the land and said this land became the land belonging to the state. So Merdeka is actually very sakit for orang asli. Dulu they were here, what, 14,000? I think now the Perak man or the new more than that, 20, 30,000. They have the history, they can prove their existence. So we all celebrate the forming of a nation, but they were in that kampung for berpuluh-puluh ribu tahun. Suddenly they realize, ada line, yang ini tanah negeri, ini tanah yang belum digezet, and that's why they're still there. Batonis all the time in court, fighting for one kampung to one kampung, and you have to convince the judge that this tanah mereka lama. Then the judge can say, ya mungkin tidak mungkin ya, you know, they have to, mana grant? They say, apa grant? I was already here before. Then they have to go to cerita kampung to prove their point. So these two started the creation of Jabatan Jakwa, and for me is the point of something is sorely wrong. That the British created a patronizing system. Orang asli ini need help, so we get a Director General. Orang tu British kan? Now not a British. For most time it was a Malay leader to jaga kepentingan orang asli. And you know what's the irony? That you and I, walaupun saya kenal Batoni, technically when I go to his kampung, the Director General of Jakwa can stop me. He said, I need to get permission from Ketua Pengarah Jakwa untuk masuk ke kampung Batoni. Walhal tu kampung Batoni. Kalau Ketua Kampung Batoni dah setuju, Batoni dah setuju, should be okay lah. Tapi actually they have used that recently, last year in Kelantan, to say no one can go in without the express permission of BG. Ini adalah membuktikan konsep kewarganegaraan orang asli itu tidak pada tahap yang sama. We have to respect them as a kampung, ada tanah, ada sejarah. Kalau kita nak masuk tu, ikutlah cara adat mereka. Mungkin cara adat mereka tu beza dengan orang kita yang orang dah lama duduk di bandar kan. Kita happy dapat satu rumah banglo, is like the wow, udah kaya kan. Tapi kenapa orang asli ni? I've done a program with student. Kenapa orang asli ni nak beribu-ribu punya ekar tanah? You know, we are happy with one plot rumah, but that sebab itu konsep kita. We have no right to impose our notion of our lifestyle terhadap orang asli. Inilah the clash sekarang. And then we mengharapkan kerajaan, as you started off by saying it's a political, you're right. Kalau nak tu boleh buat lah. You know, just allow them this land to defend the land. And now dalam satu lagi yang baru ni, keprihatinan kepada alam sekitar, climate change. For me, if we are serious about climate change, give them the land, right? Because they're going to defend the forest, and that will make our work so much easier. Kenapa tidak? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we learned a lot from that. But talking about that level of distrust, right? Vaccine pun tak nak percaya because yelah suddenly you nak tolong. Where is all that help and that trust before that? So building that takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of honest communication and honest reflection on our position and what we have done. Johnson, you are also in that position, being in the civil society, trying to empower, trying to advocate, but also trying to tip the balance, between helping what is deemed as often helpless victims, but really actually just trying to empower them. How do you find that balance is one, and also building that kind of trust with Orang Asli communities.
Right. Yeah, so I'm not an Orang Asli, so the Orang Asli. And I think a lot of things has been said by my fellow panelists over here, in terms of the resilience, the capabilities, the history of the Orang Asli people. I think that's really underappreciated. But it's no surprise, I suppose, based on how the country has developed, and if you look at the composition of the Orang Asli, and as well as the geographical location, and also the population of Orang Asli, where I think we're talking about the last census was done maybe about 2-3 years ago, about 210,000 or so Orang Asli in Peninsula, and that makes up 0.6% of the entire Semenanjung population. What is my point there? I think my point there is that I think when you think of it from the perspective of policymakers or politicians, you're not very motivated to oversee the rights and the needs and the the issues of this group. So naturally, a lot of these things, I suppose, deprioritized as well. And so, does that mean that there is no value? I think there is tremendous value. In fact, I think as mentioned by Jerald and the rest of the panelists over here, thousands of years, berpuluh-puluh ribu Orang Asli people have been here on this land, being able to optimize the resources while making sure that things are sustainable. Unfortunately, these knowledge are not available to most people. I think whatever that's been said over here, I think I like to think of it as a representation of what the status quo right now is. But it doesn't have to stay this way, and I think there are, so I work with many curious fellow Malaysians who perhaps have heard of the Orang Asli. Tak kisahlah, whether in what way, whether it's a way that puts them down or, that elevates them, but at least it sparked a curiosity. And a lot of times, you can only get a picture of what the community is like. But what we're trying to do is also to humanize the matter, where you don't talk, the problem is that when you talk about an issue at an issue level where, Orang Asli, but the truth is on the ground, Orang Asli is 18 different sub-tribes. If you go to a couple of different villages, you know that they're so different from one another, and it's very difficult to come up with a one-size-fits-all approach. So what is important really, I think it's the need to connect on a people-to-people level, to build relationships so that trust can be built or rebuilt, perhaps in many cases, and also where dignity can be upheld, where the Orang Asli people are given a chance to express their creativity, their ingenuity, and the aspirations that they have for their own people, and I think that's extremely important. I mean, unfortunately, the status quo is that many times people, when they first meet the Orang Asli, they will come with the mindset, Orang Asli need our help, Orang Asli is poor, Orang Asli is this. We can't do anything about how people think. I think we can change their mindset through the process as well of course, by the work and the stories that are being told here as well. Yeah, so I think some of the things that perhaps needs to change is this need to hear, to appreciate the ideas of the Orang Asli community themselves first, before imposing and thinking what we think is best will work for them. I give you a very real life example, because we deal a lot with houses, you know, where for many years, Rumah PPRT will be a brick house, 600 square feet, made out of bricks with a zinc roof. And we've traveled to many places. Of course, there are some Orang Asli that, okay, they can make do with it. Some of them perhaps say they like it. But many of them say, hey, this is not our way. Ni rumah batu macam gua. You know, I want to stay in a wooden house, or house with more ventilation. And you can observe that many times when you see a brick house, you have a wooden house or a shed built at the back. Then that's where everybody will lepak, you know. And why is that the case? It's because perhaps to the policy maker, it seems logical that we aspire progress means that it needs to be a brick house. Macam orang putih, you know, a brick house. This is what progress looks like, and this is just one example of many of the mismatched solutions that has come up over the years.
I think Johnson raises an important note there, or an important point there, on the need to remain positive and to remain hopeful that change is always possible. Because I mean, when we're talking about this, it's something, you know, you describe this as being centuries old, right? This issue, this problem, and it seems like it's never going to be solved. But you know, when we're speaking to a young audience, I think it's also important to instill this sense of hope, that, you know, the world is not always on fire, the world is not always that bad. I know it seems like it, but, you know, I do want to, you know, bring this, or, you know, just slightly change gears and talk about what we can do to perhaps alleviate some of these issues. You know, bila kita cakap pasal isu tanah, isu pendidikan, rasa macam, macam mana kita nak selesaikan isu ni, susah betul. And you know, I talked a bit about political will. Is that all it takes, right? But saya nak dengarkan juga daripada Eliana, bila you cakap pasal isu pendidikan, banyak isu-isu yang kita dah cakap sekarang ni, but as a young person, daripada perspektif anak muda, how do you still remain hopeful? Macam, oh, ada lagi harapan untuk kita ubahkan benda ni. Do you still have hope in the government, in decision makers, in Malaysians to have your back, to support you, untuk sokong komuniti Orang Asli, komuniti Eliana?
Okey, bercakap tentang harapan, saya rasa apa yang saya harapkan, sebenarnya isu kita orang sangat dalam lah. Kalau kita lihat isu tanah, sebenarnya nak dengan tak nak je orang buat political will lah. So sebenarnya benda ni semua saya rasa ada saya kongsikan ada lagi satu isu lah. Saya rasa orang luar tak kenal kami siapa. Jadi saya rasa isu tentang representasi dalam media pun, bila berkenaan dengan orang asli, susah orang nak dengar, betul. Dekat TV pun tak ada, nak cari orang asli susah. Jadi kalau ada pun, mesti kamu orang macam dengar bila tentang orang asli hanyalah, oh, pembangunan yang bagus untuk orang asli, atau inisiatif-inisiatif kerajaan untuk membantu pendidikan orang asli dan sebagainya. Ini sebenarnya hanyalah dari kacamata pihak-pihak seperti inilah. Tapi pernah tak dalami apa sudut atau dari pandangan orang asli itu sendiri untuk mengadaptasikan cadangan-cadangan mereka, ataupun apa cara-cara yang untuk membantu orang asli lah. So saya rasa untuk isu representasi media, jadi saya rasa kerajaan boleh, saya rasa, untuk provide media yang lebih kukuh untuk orang asli. Macam dekat Sarawak, mereka ada TV Sarawak di mana untuk mereka bercakap dalam bahasa sendiri, ada cerita sendiri. Jadi kenapa orang asli? Sebab tu bangsa lain tak pernah tahu tentang orang asli. Tak pernah tahu pun kami ada berapa suku kaum. Macam mana cara hidup kami, apa bahasa yang kami gunakan. Tak ada orang tahu. Jadi disebabkan platform media kami tak ada pun platform media yang seperti inilah. Jadi saya rasa apa yang boleh buat sekiranya ada platform media yang lebih kukuh untuk kami cerita siapa kami. Saya rasa semuanya bermula dengan pengenalan lah. Siapa orang asli, bagaimana cara hidup mereka, dan seterusnya orang lain boleh dalami apa isu kami dan bagaimana mereka boleh support.
Thank you. I also want to hear from Batuni talking about the need for change. I mean, tadi Eliana cakap sebenarnya boleh je. And I think we all agree here, actually it's not something that's impossible, it's doable. How doable, how feasible actually is it to improve things?
Oh, simple. What it means is just political will, Whether you want to do it or not, to you don't need any rockets, science or whatever, to come up with formulas or, plan, to help the Orang Asli. It's just sincere political will, to assist the Orang Asli. Recognize their land right. It's not difficult. Orang Asli are not asking the whole of Peninsular Malaysia. They're just asking recognition of their traditional land. They just want, opportunities, in education, in economic development, They want a say, in whatever, that they want to be involved in, They want to have opportunities to be given in political representations. I tell you sometimes, the way how Orang Asli is marginalized, at very, very simple level, I was talking to him, like the Prime Minister, for instance, he likes to say, anak Melayu, anak saya, anak Cina, anak saya, blah, blah, blah. But never anak Orang Asli, anak saya. I seldom hear that, That is, at the lowest, at the simplest, level, marginalization of the Orang Asli. Orang Asli are just being put, Allah, you are not important, in our schemes of things, So to me, it need political will, and there's sincerity in helping the Orang Asli, and as I always say, it's not just the state, it's the people also, like Malaysians, I'm not saying all, there are Malaysians who are very sympathetic to the Orang Asli, who are concerned about the plight of the Orang Asli. NGOs, for instance, NGOs like Jerald, they have been helping us. We appreciate that, but many people, they just say, Orang Asli, because of that, they don't give, what do you call it, they don't have to think twice, to evict Orang Asli from their land, and it's happening everywhere, So I think it's time has come, has actually come, to recognize Orang Asli as the first people of this country. They have attendant rights, with that, and they are also human beings. They want to wujud, they want to hidup, so give them the chance, and it's not that difficult, As I mentioned, they don't want to become the Prime Minister, they don't want to rule the country, they just want, whatever they want, recognize their land rights, recognize, give them the opportunities for them to progress, I think it's not difficult, it's just sincerity and political will.
Yeah, I agree, it's not that difficult because just looking at the past few years, we've seen some legal reforms, we've seen some constitutional amendments, some of which I'm sure you're aware of and interested in. The minimum age of voting is now 18 years old, not 21. That's given a lot of you guys the right to vote now, last year in the recent elections and in the upcoming state election as well. So we've seen that, we've seen some other legal reforms, mandatory death sentences now as well. So it actually is doable. I want to hear from Jerald as well. you work with government, you work with government agencies and ministries, you know how politicians think like, to a lot of us that seems something yang macam unattainable, susah kita nak access dekat diorang ni, but you have been, in this high-level meetings and decision-making settings. So, sebenarnya boleh ke tak?
So I think one example, Suhakam did a national inquiry on land rights in 2013. There's a report, the first actually in the world, broad-based consultation on all Orang Asli. Whenever we mention Orang Asli, is indigenous person of Semenanjung Malaysia. Then the indigenous of Sabah Sarawak, they have their own different terminology. Orang Asli. So that report says the government is supposed to ambil 18 syur. The cabinet at that time, I think cabinet and the Najib said, okay, kita setuju 17 syur lah. So one, they didn't agree to set up a national commission on land, right? So we said, okay, setuju 17, okay lah, nampak banyak lah. Then they set up a cabinet committee chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister, that was Amani. So he had his first meeting. Then when I went into Suhakam, 6 years no meeting, because the cabinet task force is chaired by the DPM, and the DPM chairs many cabinet task force. So after one meeting, second meeting never happened. So we were kept asking what's the progress, because all that has issues of legal reform, education reform, land alienation with the state power, banyak lah. Then so happened a Director General of BAYU, Bahagian Hal Ehwal Undang-Undang Jabatan Perdana Menteri, a woman who came in about 2 years ago, she said, why are we waiting, nothing is happening? And she was good. She said, okay, the first cabinet meeting agreed to pursue 6 of the recommendations. Let's work on the 6. Suddenly there was, for 1 year, we had many meetings on trying to move this forward, no? Doing land mapping, doing study. So I said, then, but she was moved, and then again it became silent. So the question on agreements by the government, of course there are problems, because land is a state government matter. So the federal minister, he can say, saya sokong, but after that he has to go to the chief minister and sultan to get all those agreements. So that's where it becomes problematic. But I'm saying that it seems like many agreements is a tick box, but the implementation did not happen. The Kata Orang Asli, 1954, numerous proposal for amendment from the Orang Asli community, from Suhakam, from the NGOs. We met Minister William Murthy 2 kali. Buat semua cadangan lawyers, but we submitted everything. Then no one to follow up. So there's a lot of disjoint, policy disjoint from government to government. It's always going to like pick up the file again and book up file as well. So I'm not sure why is it difficult for policy for 220,000 people. One hal, issue hak reserve Melayu is so well managed, which means the government has a notion of how to manage lands very well. Can you imagine if even one kaki persegi reserve tanah Melayu diambil oleh siapa-siapa? Whoa, there will be a protest, there will be so many speeches. Tapi mereka punya tanah dah banyak dah diceroboh, tak ada pun. So the question is, it's not that we don't know, we know. We can manage land reserve very well from the day of independence, even before independence. But the Orang Asli land reserve, peratus penggazetan dia sekarang I think belum lagi sampai 30%, 25%. This is after almost 70 years, Merdeka. There's only 25% that gazette. Meaning if they don't have the title agreement by state government, mereka masih lagi macam tenant at will lah. Dia tunggu kalau kerajaan tu baik, kalau tomorrow the state government will agree this is going to have a development. Then Tony's kampung or Eliana's kampung will one day find a signboard saying this tapak akan ada pembangunan, ada akan. Then that's the first day they will realize this has been in discussion 1 year ago. The question is, as a Malaysian yang terkesan oleh keputusan-keputusan pembangunan, kenapakah tidak perbincangan the word free, prior, informed consent be part of the procedures for engaging Orang Asli? Orang Asli, for me, they don't need your help to make decisions. They know what they want. They're very clear about the development framework. They're not saying, hey, keep us poor, no. And a few days ago we were at some Orang Asli, a big forum in UKM, and I heard the speeches, closing speeches, overly romanticized about Orang Asli. Oh, you know, we have to tolong them, you know, they are not people who don't want, you know, they are not business, it is all wrong. they're good business people. They are planting oil palm, durian trees, tapi peluang untuk tanah itu dalam tangan mereka tak terjamin. It's always one day this boleh cancel. And this is why there are so many fronts. Satu, pendidikan, perumahan, kesihatan, tanah mereka tak terjamin. Then even menghormati adat resam, cara hidup, keagamaan mereka masih lagi tidak terjamin. Recently there was a court case, 137 batik people who went to court to say we were forced to change our agama to Islam. How come? And then our Deputy Prime Minister Zahid said, hey, Islam doesn't allow paksaan, kan? That is part of the fabric of Islam. Tapi dilakukan. So siapakah yang membenarkan pegawai-pegawai kerajaan, jabatan-jabatan Islam itu masuk untuk mengislamkan orang asli atau siapa-siapa tanpa izin diri mereka? I think this is a big question. Adakah kita anggap mereka ini macam tidak ada keyakinan diri untuk buat keputusan sendiri? Dan keputusan itu diambil di pejabat-pejabat di Ipoh ke Kuala Lumpur di Kuala. I think it's time we stop outside deciding for the inside because they are capable and they can decide for themselves.
Thank you.
To add, something to what Jerald has said about the conversion, you know what happened? That the Orang Asli in Ulu Perak, the Jahai, they don't have IC. And then JPN and with Jakwa, they get a group of them, collected their names, blah blah blah, to do their IC. When they come back, in the IC they are stated as Islam, Muslim, even though they are not Islam, so they are converted through their IC, not through the. This is what has happened, Yeah, I'm just telling you how people are so, how to say. They just, simply no respect for Orang Asli, for sensitivity of Orang Asli, for what Orang Asli want. They just don't care. They think, we do for that. But if they do it, something that is good, it's okay, but most of the time, as I mentioned, a lot of it, is not to the liking of the Orang Asli. It's not good for the Orang Asli community. Yeah.
No, thank you for adding that. I think it's all news to us. I mean, we've heard that happen so many times, but I think to some of the members of the audience, those at home, especially young people, I think this might be a revelation to some of you, but this is actually what happens. And so, going back to the point about change, about how that's actually so possible, sebenarnya boleh je nak buat. It's not that impossible, it's doable, and we've seen legal reforms in the past few years to prove that it can actually be done. But politics is political will. It sounds simple, but it's a lot harder than that. It's a lot harder than it sounds. So, Johnson, also just to remind you guys, we have about 5 minutes left before we open up Q&A session. So I hope we have some questions ready before I open up the floor. But Johnson, talking about change, right? We always hear that same narrative. Susah, it's so hard to do this, it's so hard to do that. How did that spur you to want to take matters into your own hands and wanting to change things?
Yeah, so I think political will is important, but political will takes a very long time. I'm a very patient guy. I believe that ultimately lasting change begins with us on the ground itself, and I think as I was sharing earlier about the potential and the capabilities of Orang Asli. I think I can't speak on behalf of all Orang Asli because I've not met all Orang Asli. I can only speak on behalf of the friends that I've met who happen to be Orang Asli as well. And I know that on a policy making level, sometimes we have to cluster groups together, and have a generalization of what the needs and the wants are as well. But actually, things happen always on a personal level. So Jerald, for example, you mentioned that Orang Asli is good at business. I would agree to disagree with you. Yes, I've met good businessmen Orang Asli, but I also met bad businessmen Orang Asli as well. But it's just like the rest of us. The only issue is just for many generations, I think Orang Asli people, perhaps because of where they are, and perhaps, like I mentioned just now, because it's easy to overlook and maybe harder to access, people sometimes, they've been oppressed or taken advantage of, and that's led to distrust or generational traumas and things like that. And so while they have at least the ones that I've met, many of them, they have all the abilities actually to become successful, to achieve the dreams that they want, but they perhaps need some encouragement. And I think that's something that can be given on a peer-to-peer level. You don't need the government to come and say, Orang Asli semua okay, semua very good, so clever. No, you don't need, that doesn't change the person, but actually a friend. All you need actually is just one friend who believes in you, to support you along the way, or not support, but to walk with you along the way. And that can make all the difference already. Just someone to sit with you and listen to you, perhaps get the past out of the way and then find a way to move forward. That itself is already a help that is important. And that's not just for Orang Asli, that's something that all humans need as well. And I think that's actually something that we can do really as fellow Malaysians. And I think that mindset is also very important, that when we start, we also don't start with, the Orang Asli, the subject of my charity. It's not. They're not. You don't, sometimes there's a glamour, right? You say, saya kerja dengan Orang Asli, you sangat noble. It's like, that is not what it's about. But I think there's just tremendous potential that's waiting to be unlocked. I mean, you talk about all the issues that the world is trying to solve today, like climate change and all that. We are sitting on one of the most fertile land in the world. Actually, Semenanjung, Borneo, our microbial content and all that is perhaps similar or second to the Amazon. Aside from that, there's not many other areas that has this in the world anymore. And who is the expert of this space? It's the one that has been living here for thousands of years. And I think that's why there should be a special emphasis. I mean, that's just one example. I think that's why there should be a special emphasis on Orang Asli. Not because, so kesian, but actually there's so much that they can actually do for everybody around, not just in the country, not just for themselves, but also in the country and around the world as well. But I think that what's needed to make that change is just patience to go through the process, to deal with perhaps some of the ignorance that we have today, and allow people to make those mistakes. And of course, we will have our panelists here to make sure that if anybody gets out of line as well, then we try to correct it along the way.
Thanks, Johnson. Now we are coming towards the end of the session. We're supposed to start Q&A, but I do want to end today's session with perhaps Eliana, kalau you boleh kongsikan sikit message, apa harapan Eliana, dan harapan bukan saja untuk Eliana dan komuniti Eliana, tetapi untuk anak muda lain yang tengah dengar sekarang ni, message untuk kita akhiri session ini.
Okay, so harapan saya, semua benda ni macam yang semua panelis cakap, nak dengan tak nak je. Tapi untuk semua, pesanan untuk semua, sebenarnya key dia adalah respect lah. Kita semua bangsa Malaysia kan, so respect dan jangan ignore lah, ambil peduli tentang apa yang terjadi, terutamanya isu-isu tentang orang asli. Kami juga bangsa Malaysia. So sebelum tu mungkin saya akan kongsikan sedikitlah inisiatif saya dari Apa Kata Wanita Orang Asli. So kami, macam yang saya cakap tadi, kurang representasi media. Jadi inilah kami ambil langkah sendiri atas dasar kesedaran. So kami adalah sekumpulan belia wanita orang asli. Kami buat buku tentang kami pun ada hak bersekolah. Jadi kami juga produce 3 filem pendek dan kami ada YouTube channel sendiri di mana di situ tempat kami dokumentasikan pelbagai suku kaum orang asli yang mempunyai identiti, budaya, masakan, bahasa kami. Jadi sebab kalau bukan kami, siapa lagi kan? Takkan kami nak tunggu orang lain yang dokumentasikan. So kami ini inisiatif sendirilah untuk buat sesuatu.
Thank you so much. Terima kasih, Eliana. Can we have a round of applause for all our panelists today for such great sharing and great insights. I think we all managed to learn a lot. So, to cut things short, if we can start the Q&A session. I know you guys have a lot of interesting questions, or I hope you guys have a lot of questions. Banyak yang kita belajar. It might be quite a lot of new things that we learn. So, it's a lot of information to take in all at once. And while we have the opportunity to ask such great panelists and subject matter experts on this issue, I hope you guys have questions to ask.
Hi, I'm Nura. I'm part of the MIDP. Since no one's asking a question, I'll just ask. Okay. So I'm actually very interested. Today we talked about land quite a lot, but I come from the education field, so I want to ask a little bit about that. So one of my experiences is that I work with Asta. So it's an asrama where the Orang Asli students are placed, and then they are put into schools around KL. But from my talks with them, the discussion with them, they don't really like it. So they feel even more left behind and whatnot. So my question is, what are your comments on that? And is there something that we should do to support these Orang Asli kids, as students in the education?
Eliana, you want to jawab? Some thoughts on that?
So bercakap tentang pendekatan lah dengan kanak-kanak orang asli kan, sebenarnya mereka juga sama lah seperti kanak-kanak yang lain. Cuma macam isu yang saya bawakan tadi, saya ada initiate satu kelas lah di dalam komuniti saya. Saya bermula dengan kampung saya sendiri. So saya buka kelas ada sebelum ni lah. So sebenarnya ada satu student, ada satu kanak-kanak orang asli. Ada satu hari tu seorang ibu lah, dia datang kat saya. Dia cakap dia sakit kepala. Dia kata dia tengok anak dia yang umur 12 tahun dah 2 hari tak nak pergi sekolah. So dia setiap malam, 2 malam yang dia tak pergi sekolah tu, bilik dia terbuka lampu, penuh buku dekat lantai. So dia tanya, kenapa dengan kamu ni? Ada masalah ke? Lepas tu dia cakap dia tak boleh, dia takut nak pergi sekolah selagi dia tak siap kerja sekolah ni. Kalau tak, dia kena 6 kali pusing padang, kena denda. So macam bagi saya, persekitaran sekolah yang membuatkan mereka, anak-anak orang asli, diorang tak takut sama ada dengan cikgu ataupun pendekatan lah, cara pendekatan cikgu tersebut. Jadi malam tu saya ajar budak tu, dia tak tahu pun even simbol sama dengan, bahagi, tak tahu. So saya ajar, saya tunjuk contoh satu je soalan, dan soalan kedua, 3, 4 dia buat sendiri. So nampak tak, diorang sebenarnya bijak, sangat pandai, cuma pendekatan yang digunakan tu oleh warga pendidik dengan kanak-kanak orang asli sangat berbeza. Dan sebenarnya boleh lakukan sesuatu lah, cuma nak dengan tak nak. Ya. Hatilah, dengan hati yang betul. Kalau ada passion nak bantu kanak-kanak orang asli berjaya, dan sebenarnya boleh. Fahami mereka lah, isu mereka. Tak pun belajar macam mana cara mereka hidup dekat rumah, selalu tanya khabar dan sebagainya.
Thank you. Actually, bila kita cakap pasal minat budak sekolah kan, actually I pun boleh relate. I rasa kalau I budak tu pun pergi sekolah, bawa keluar dari kampung, nak kena belajar kat sekolah lain pun susah. You know, I mean, I as a kid, I didn't like to do my homework as well. So I think it goes the same for all. I think it just matters on your approach. It depends on how you approach, the subject and how you present that certain subject. If you want to present it in an interesting way, sorry, just please.
berkenaan yang ni budak tu di tempat di asrama ke? Umur muda lagi? Sekolah menengah. Sebab kebanyakan orang asli ni kan, like in Perak, for instance, yang kampung jauh-jauh tu, most of them place dekat hostel lah, ya, sebab nak berulang tu jauh sangat, you know. Kadang-kadang actually kalau budak sekolah menengah tu not that bad lah, you know. Yang masalah ni dengan budak yang sekolah rendah, you know. Yang umur, kadang-kadang umur seawal 7 tahun pun dah diletakkan di asrama. Jadi dia orang rindu mak bapak dan itu ini kan. Tambah lagi di sekolah, di asrama tu penjagaan dari segi guru tu kan tegas sangat kan. Ya, orang tak tahan, they cannot take it, you know. In fact, kalau semua ingat kes di Kelantan kan yang Astro kan, strict sangat, you know. Diorang lari sehingga mati berapa orang kan yang kes macam tu kan. So the approach tu, you know, it has to be apa tu, the touch ibu bapa tu kena disematkan juga dengan penjaga tu lah, ya. Dan bagi sekolah menengah tu kadang-kadang environment tu lah juga kan, you know, as she said, you know, understand, you know, the orang asli tu value dia, kadang-kadang apa tu pendekatan dia orang, dia value tu kadang-kadang ada perbezaan sedikit. So kalau kita faham, kita adjustkan, ya, kita ni boleh. Ramai orang asli, I mean, like in Perak for instance, you know, banyak duduk di asrama dan dia orang berjaya, ya, dia orang berjaya sampai universiti ada PhD pun tak berapa orang kan. Can be done, you know, it's just the approach lah, you know, understand them, approach and try to talk to them lah, be friend to them lah, jangan jadi ngejaskan, mengarah lagi, itu susah sikit lah, ya, okay.
Thank you. I mean, we have another question. We have a few questions. If we can start with the gentleman in the white shirt.
Yeah. So for the Orang Asli community, there are a lot of stories of land grabbing by the federal or state government. Could you two give, Amani and Miss Eliana, give more details on how the process looks like? Because even though there are laws that protect the rights of Orang Asli and equal right of reversion if your land is taken away, but I feel like in practice this conversation is not adequate or hasn't even been given.
Sorry. Yeah, we couldn't really hear the first part of the question. I believe it's to do with taking action.
For the process of, if the state government takes your land, there's supposed to be compensation under the law. But I feel like in practice, this compensation does not exist or is inadequate, and it's even unfair treatment towards the people who ask for such a system. Could Mr. Amani and Miss Eliana illustrate that experience?
Thank you. I believe the question is, I believe Tony is the right person to answer for that, because you go to court every other day to handle these issues, so maybe you can clarify on the process.
Okay, you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, there is an act, you know, called Aboriginal Peoples Act. In the act, it's provided that compensation has to be paid, you know, to Orang Asli if their land is taken. But in the act, you know, the act only provides for payment of compensation to for trees, you know, like rubber trees, you know, fruit trees, you know, not the land itself, you know. If they want to ask for compensation for land, they have to take their case to court, you know. And in most of the cases, the Orang Asli has won, you know, that the court has to compensate them, you know, for the value of the land, for the land itself, you know, as provided under Land Acquisition Act, as well as Article 13, you know, of the Constitution, you know, that if your land is taken, your property is taken, adequate compensation must be given. But they have to take to court, you know, they have to go to court if they want the compensation for the land to be paid. Otherwise, based on the Act 134, the government will just pay them compensation for fruit trees only. Yeah, that is the law. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I believe you have another question.
Hi, my name is Balkis. But before I go to my question, I'd like to start with my own experience. During my primary school, I was in school in Shahadam, Section 6. And during Standard 1, I think I had 2 classmates of Orang Asli. And we all know that they were Orang Asli because they dress differently, their hair was different, And you know, during the report card day, the parents came and we can see that they're awkward in our community, right? But the problem is, they were only in our class for that 1 year. And I've forgotten all about them until today that I'm sitting here listening to you talking about it. And it just occurred to me, like, did the teachers not work hard enough for them? Like, what was the problem? Because throughout that 1 year, I can see that they're weird. I'm sorry to say that, like, don't take it as an offense, because for us, like, as kids, right, 7-year-olds, we did not know how to talk to them. We did not know how to make friends with them. I, as a person personally, I wasn't a mean girl, so I really would just be open to, like, talking to anyone. I was shy, but I was not like, you know, saying bad things, mean things about them. But I really have no idea how to do it. And I had only 1 year chance to do it and didn't do it, and they just disappeared the next year, and no one ever talked about them, you know, after that year. And you know, because then it got me to thinking. Sorry, I'm not yet at my question. How, like, am I, like, I believe like one person can create a ripple, definitely. But how am I, as a person, just one person, to do anything that can help them or empower them if I don't even know them? I don't see them in my school, I don't see them in my community, I don't, you know, we don't randomly meet them at the mall or at the movies, you know. And of course, media representation is another thing, but honestly, growing up, I've seen Orang Asli on TV. On RTN, there are channels and programs that covers Orang Asli people. I'm not familiar with those, but I've seen them on TV, but it really still feels so far away from me. I feel like we have assimilated with Chinese, Indian, and even people from Singapore, Indonesia, you know, people who came here to work in our country, and then we grew to really be friends and you know, become family. Like, what is the best case scenario actually for Orang Asli? Do you want to just stay wherever that you are, and the government support in a sense that, you know, build your own education system, healthcare system and all that in the place that you are? Or the best case scenario is for the Orang Asli to be you know, assimilated into our community, like go to our, you know, the schools in the city, go to the hospital in the city freely. Like, what would be the best case scenario actually? Because in my personal perspective, it would be even better if, you know, you don't stay where you are. You assimilate with us, like, and be friends and be a society, so that we feel close to you. And for us to empower you, like for anyone to want to empower you, we feel that we need to do it because we see you beside us, like, around us. Yeah. I feel like the politicians feel the same way too. Maybe they want to help. Maybe some of them really want to help, but they don't know you and how. They don't even know how. And like, language is one thing. To have Orang Asli to speak, to be able to speak in our language is actually a bonus lah. But I would like to know how they speak. I would like to hear it. You know, we hear the aliens and the Chinese speak different languages. We hear even people from different countries, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, come here and speak their language. I don't hear how Orang Asli speak around me, and I feel like that would make it. That's how we, you know, can side.
Thank you for your experience and for your question. We are running out of time, and I do want to make time for other questions. But there's a lot of layers to this. I mean, a lot of things have been raised. There's the issue of the othering of Orang Asli communities, the need to bridge different communities. But I think I can see for some people in the audience that there's still a lot of misconception. Masih banyak lagi orang tak faham, masih banyak lagi orang yang tak tahu. Saya rasa tadi kita dah banyak cerita pasal apa sebenarnya yang mereka nak, apa sebenarnya yang mereka perlukan. You know, I'm not the right person to answer for this, of course, but there's just so many layers to this. Tony, if you can help share, or Johnson.
Again, I can't answer on behalf of Orang Asli, but I can answer the simple part. I think, how do perhaps you or your peers living around the city and things like that, how can you get to know them? There are many programs out there of people who have established alliances or collaborations together with Orang Asli individuals or groups. And they have perhaps like projects or discourse that you can actually engage in. You know, perhaps I would encourage you, I mean, so my organization, EPIC, we also have several of these sort of opportunities at different levels, whether it's working side by side with community members, or even coming, going for a tour where an Orang Asli guide can actually show you their backyard. And you know, so there are activities like, so that's with native discovery, for example. So these are some programs I think that would be good to get started. You can be assured, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of all NGOs, but there are some who have really done the groundwork and built the relationships with the people, and yeah, where they are able to also represent themselves in the process as well. So maybe that's like a good start.
Thank you. Sorry, I believe Jerald had something to share as well. We do have a couple of minutes left.
Okay, thanks for the question. I think the background to this is the framework of inclusivity and equality. I think that's our perennial problem. So our response is put everybody in the same box and things will be better. I think that's not the formula for Malaysia. Indonesia tried to Javanize many communities. They sent the Maduris to Pontianak, and then there was real life clashes, killings and war, because you try to make a nation with one identity. For me, that's a no, and I think the word the marginalized Bumiputera, the title of this also is troublesome, because the concept Bumiputera is also a divisive framework. So within that framework is another division. So the question is that if you and I don't understand them, that's fine. We will never understand all of you here. I don't know your communities, what food you like, but I respect you because you're a human being. I'm interested. As long as you're interested, that's fine. But as long as you can feel that because you're different, you don't have to follow my way. The problem in our framework of governance is that the majority tries to decide for the minority. The power of control over. So state governments actually know what an Orang Asli is, but this is actually an unmentioned question about control on land, on the wealth of who holds the land. So why give Orang Asli 1,000 acres of community land? Because finally, the government will get more money if I give it to a plantation owner, or I give it for timber concessions. So it's a money question, it's a greed question, it's not about not understanding. So I think it's time we change that framework to try to tell that, oh, you assimilate, and the word assimilate for me is the most dangerous. Once we get into that, when we've tried, I gave you the example of, and Tony gave you the example of the ISIS finding themselves as Islam, because the notion of assimilation, in 1990s, there was a cultural assimilation policy, secret document was made known, of the Jabat Jakwa having a plan to Islamize the Orang Asli because of the concept of assimilation. They thought that the sister neighborhood between Kampung Melayu and Kampung Asli meant we all satu kampung. I think this notion of satu kampung is satu kampung yang kita menghormati, kita faham orang tu makan dia lain tapi masih lagi orang Malaysia. The concept of we are different but yet neighbors, I think is a good question. I think your point is, just because we don't know them, and many people don't know, and this is a question about Orang Aslis. Kelantanis, Terengganos have hardly any Chinese, Indians or other ethnic minorities. Does that mean they have power to decide for how others in Malaysia should exist? We've not met a Sabahan in Sarawak. Does that mean we have powers to decide for others? I think this is a fight against racism. And that's why I think we need to call it out, and we need to tell many Malaysians that you don't have a right over the others just because their voice is small. And it's not just for Orang Aslis. It's a national disease, a national problem.
Thank you, and I think we should end on that note. I'm sorry we don't have time for another question. I believe we are running towards the end already, but if the panelists are fine, are you okay with some members of the audience to come up to you if they have questions or reach out to you? You may come up to them, come to me if you have any questions. We're happy to receive questions. Yes. Yes, Eliana also has a YouTube channel we'd like to plug towards the end of our session.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Untuk sesiapa yang nak lebih kenal orang asli, so macam yang saya cakap tadi, kami ada di social media, kami ada YouTube channel. Dekat situ ada pelbagai suku kaum orang asli, kamu boleh pelajari bahasa mereka, cara hidup mereka dan sebagainya. So just follow dan subscribe lah YouTube channel kami.
Follow, like, and subscribe.
Follow, like, and subscribe.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for your question. I believe that is the perfect platform to get to know them as you'd like. I appreciate the curiosity that you have, and I appreciate the safe space that we have created today in this hall. I hope that we were able to learn a lot. I learned a lot, and I hope that what we can take out of this is to begin at a place of empathy and sympathy and understanding, respect and honesty. I mean, it seems so cliche, but really all it takes is that, and then you realize that change is actually so possible, so feasible and doable. Boleh sebenarnya, nak atau tak nak. I think that's what we can take out of today. And plenty more that we like to share, but that is all the time that we have today. That is also the final session of Youth Pact. I'd like to personally say thank you so much to the organizers and everyone who has been able to attend and participate in this important discourse. Thank you so much for, in your own ways, trying to make this place a better place in our own ways. So thank you so much once again. Thanks for saving the best for the last, for the session of Youth Pact. I'd like to pass on to Em. Thank you.
Alright, thank you everyone. Quick correction, that's the final forum at Youth Pact today. We have yet to see the final session, which is the closing performances that will take place right now actually. So before we do that, please don't leave, don't get up from your chairs. I'm watching you right now, please stay. Can we go on to the QR codes? There will be 2 QR codes displayed on the screen right now. On the right, this is so bad for me. On my right, on your left, is the QR code for the session that just ended. So please scan that QR code. I would like to see phones all out right now. Please scan that and tell us what you like or not like about the session. Please be as honest as possible. Your input is very important to help us curate better festivals in the future. This QR code on the right is basically the QR code for you to check into the next session, which is the closing performances. So please do that. Once you are settled with the QR codes, we will cue in the final session for the day. If you don't know, the final session for the day is a series of performances. It's called An Evening with Haj the Tailor. I will let the founder explain what Haj the Tailor is and the great amazing work that they do, so you can learn better. They offer classes as well, a lot of open mic nights, a lot of performance platforms as well. So for all of you budding, up and coming, or even experienced art practitioners, you can please stay and connect with them after the session. Alright.